and you are now watching The Initiative with your hosts, Eagle, Ocho, and Esquire. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the initiative. I'm Ocho.
I'm the Eagle.
And this is our first episode here. Today we have Professor Johnson, Mr. David Wells, and also Mr. Russell. Thank you for coming, guys.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Now, first and foremost, thank you once again for being on the first episode of the initiative, BLMI's first talk show series, we want to call it?
Podcast.
It's everything.
Yeah.
It's going to be out there in media, don't worry about it. But at the same time, here today's week's theme, we're here to talk about Black Solidarity Day. Right? Right, Eagle?
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's get right into it. So before we get into Black Solidarity Day, let's discuss why this podcast web series is very important. Why is it needed? What's the significance, especially being launched on Black Solidarity Day? Professor Johnson.
Oh, wow. We're starting
I mean, we'll take up a spot real quick. Mr. Wells, but what was the origin? What was the origin?
I know, right?
We'll go there.
Lawrence is like, I'm just a guest.
Where, how did it all begin, man?
Man, so there were a couple of film students, and they're actually usually behind the camera. They'll be behind the cameras. So Salif, I'm going to shout out their names just because, I want to give them their respect. So Salif and Melly, so they were both speaking about, representation, the way that we're represented in media. And so, I was in my office doing my work, sort of like eavesdrop, heard them talking about it. I'm like, hey.
Yeah.
So you guys are film majors. How are you going to change that? And they were like, oh, well, that's why we film majors, because our goal is to change it. So because I like to get the last word. So I'm like, so since you want to do that, how about we just start a podcast/web show talk series? And they're like, well, they started breaking it down. We could do YouTube, we could do this. But I'm like, I'm just thinking about doing a show.
Let's do a show.
So let's just do a show, where students run it. So it's students hosting. Thank you guys. Students, behind the cameras. Students, in the production. Students helping with the research on the content that we're doing. So it's really about changing the narrative in a sense, right? So students are leading it. Our students of color, Black and Latino students here working, doing things that the media doesn't normally portray. And because we have the access to the internet and stuff like that, we're able to sort of influence and shift the narrative in a sense. So that's where the conversation started talking, and then Salif and them was like, Mr. Wells, we were just having a conversation.
Now we're here.
Right. So for me, it's just like I'm really excited. It's a way for students to practice their craft. I know you're a radio personality. You're a film major, actor. So it's just the opportunity for us to do that while bringing in guests who have real pertinent information on some of the topics that we're discussing. So that's it. And I think they call me executive producer. I didn't even know what that meant.
Executive producer.
EP credit. He wants EP credit.
Exactly what he did. What you do?
I'm like, what is the executive producer about?
Oh, man.
Executive gets paid.
They get...
Not here. This is for love. This is love.
All right.
But anybody else? How do you feel about why this is necessary, especially in any kind of media and also any kind of collegiate spaces as well?
Students lead movements. And anything that empowers students to either expand their knowledge base or to connect with other people of like mind to foster, a better America, a better world, I'm always for. That was taught to me from my father. So I'm always for that. So when David calls me and go, hey, we're doing this webcast, all I said was when. It was like, when? All right, I'll be there. Because you guys are the change makers. Be it cultural, be it social, be it political. Where we go as a people, as a nation, is in your hands. And the more education we can, the elders can give and the semi-elders can give to you guys to give you the tools, the better. So I will always be for students. And I think for me, this is also important because you're using multiple different media streams, podcasts, internet, so that's where they are. Exactly. That's where, that's where the youth are. That's where the students are. And to see people, I'm a father. I have a 6-year-old son. So for my son to be able to see a podcast and see other young black men and black Latino and Latinos in college doing podcasts on social media, it reinforces what my wife and I tell him about. Hey, you're going to college. So for me, so it's each one teach one.
Exactly. Definitely. So you feel like this is also paving the way for the generation, specifically like Generation Z, because I'm a millennial, but after us would be Generation Z. So we're paving the way for Generation Z.
Yes.
Okay. That's what's up. Professor Johnson.
I would say it's important because how often do you get to see black people speaking authentically? Almost everything on television, movies, media, it's rehearsed, it's contrived. People are saying what they have to say for profit. I think with us sitting around this table, we're saying what we feel, what we think, and it provides a more authentic voice for, if this is out on the internet, we're having a conversation about things that matter in our lives, about society, communities, and we're not doing so under the white gaze, right? So we're able to be ourselves in a way that people who are getting paid might not be able to be themselves. So if you're doing it for the love, that love might produce, whatever's necessary.
I understand. Okay, so then now let's get into what Black Solidarity Day is. From my knowledge, I've actually found out about Black Solidarity Day last year. And till this day, I still don't know much. So please educate me, elaborate on what Black Solidarity is.
All right. Black Solidarity Day was founded by my father in 1969. My father's Dr. Carlos, was Dr. Carlos C. Russell. He's recently deceased, died August of last year. The purpose of Black Solidarity Day is threefold. One, and we'll take it back from threefold. It's multiple layered. As we were talking earlier, blacks represent 15% of the American population, right? We also represent 1.5 trillion in consumer spending, right?
That is a fact, yes.
But we don't have 50% of seats in Congress. We don't have 50% of the governorships, 50% of the senators. We don't have 50% mayors in this nation. We don't. And at the time my father did it, it was at the end of the civil rights movement. It was progressing more into like black liberation, black empowerment, and the other movements as things were fracturing. And he wanted to continue the vein of nonviolence because one of the things he's always told me is, power is never given, power is taken. How do you take power nonviolently? Now, protesting has a certain impact, but after a while, it dies. People just start to turn a blind eye.
But let me interject real quick. Let's see how protesting has done for Puerto Rico. Also, Hong Kong, I won't say right now it's controversial over there.
Yeah.
Especially look at Puerto Rico right now.
Puerto Rico's had a governor change, right? Which is great. But the economics have not changed.
Yes.
The way the reason why Puerto Rico is impoverished is because being a commonwealth doesn't give it the same benefits as it was a state, nor does it give it the same benefits as it was independent.
Exactly.
So what you have is venture capitalists going to Puerto Rico, making deals with other venture capitalists to keep Puerto Ricans impoverished. You see what I mean? And so this is going back to the economic message of Black Solidarity Day. We represent 1.5 trillion. Latinos, which is, I always say, is a culture, not a race, it's another 1.5 because there are blacks who are also Latino. My father's from Panama. Don't go there. My mom was born and raised in Brooklyn, in Michigan, and English was spoken in the house. But I go to Panama as often as I can. And, Tostones, my phone go, all that, I'm good. But going back, Latino is a culture, not a race. So the economic impact is even bigger. So what happens? Say, what happens? Because it's also based on a play that I'm blocking the name of the play right now. It's off the top of my head. Day of Absence. What happens if? Thank you. What happens if blacks, Latinos, and people of color stayed home for a day? Just stayed home. Teachers, cops, law enforcement, judges. You know,
Not a lot would get done that day.
you know, just no one would not allowed to get done. The stock market would go down,
That is well.
right?
Yeah.
See, people's pockets would hurt. When you start, people feel when they talk about the civil rights movement and they talk about the Montgomery boycott. What facilitated the change was that the people stayed home and Montgomery buses lost money. And when they started to lose money, they had to change their policies. You see what I mean?
I see exactly what you're saying.
Economics is power. We have 1.5 trillion, just blacks alone. When you consider other people of color, 3 trillion. But we're not using the economics to facilitate the change that we want.
So the idea of Black Solidarity Day also came from I'm having a little right now. Black Wall Street.
Yeah, you can say you can say that basically.
Black Wall
But
Street.
it wasn't only that, And the other thing about Black Solidarity Day, it was a time for us to reflect at home about the issues affecting our community.
Okay.
And then it was done purposely the day before Election Day. Because think about it, right before an election, every person of color stays home. That's an economic hit. Bam.
Exactly.
Right? And then the next day, we all appear and vote. And and not vote as we're voting now. Vote like Obama's running every year.
Even though he's not.
I'm saying,
Yeah,
but we have
The energy.
that energy. We are systematically not voted like we should.
But that energy is not consistent. How can we get that energy consistent?
This is why we're here.
Yeah.
To get the message across.
That's the first-
You have to understand, when Black Solidarity Day came about with my father, there was no internet. There was, it was tree call. It was, as my father called it, phone tree. You at home, call to your people. This is what we're doing, and it slowly, came out like that. Today with the internet, you can hit 1 million people in what, a second, 5 seconds.
Yeah.
As soon as you upload it, and then you can have a conversation and national debate. Like I was talking earlier, Killer Mike talks about Black Solidarity Day without mentioning Black Solidarity Day. And see, the thing is, we as a people need to have a national plan.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. We as a people need to have a national plan, a state plan, and a local plan. And they don't always intersect. And we need to have a plan. This is my father's vision. We need to have a plan that we then hold elected officials and corporations accountable for. Far too often, people come and go, "Hey, vote for me. I'm cool. I Hillary Clinton. I have hot sauce in my bag," and we go and vote. But are they?
Unfortunately.
And mind you, I'm not saying that Hillary Clinton's her policies and procedures wouldn't have benefited our community, but I'm saying there was a pandering there that got people, but we don't hold them accountable. What if we held them accountable? These are the 10 things we want. And then, as far as Congress, every 2 years. Of those 10 things, what have you given us? All right, no, you're out.
Okay.
And that would change the dynamics. That will also change the way, and I'm not talking about Democrats and Republicans. Republicans are doing what they're doing because they don't see the black vote or the Latino vote as something that they can get or use to maintain power.
Now, in the political scheme, would those who encourage and acknowledge Black Solidarity Day, would that be a different political party, would you say? Maybe Black Panther Party? Neo Black Panther Party?
About who would bring the social justice, the economic reforms that we need for sustained economic growth and sustained political empowerment. And and when you look at America as a whole, when the least of us is uplifted, it uplifts everybody. You know, we're talking about Black Solidarity Day, but if you raise the minimum wage and improve education in the city, it's going to improve the education of the poor whites in, you know, Nebraska and Wyoming, wherever they are.
Exactly.
You know, you know, so you know, being pro-black does not mean you're anti-white. Being pro-black means that, hey, if you help us, everyone rises to the occasion. And it's been proven time and time again. But until we grasp economic and political power, we would have states like Georgia, Virginia, Alabama, Louisiana, North Carolina, South Carolina, which has substantial black populations but has never had a black governor.
Really?
Virginia has one.
crazy.
Virginia had one,
Okay.
and he serves one term,
One
right?
term.
Sheesh.
And we're not talking. What I'm talking about, I'm not talking about doing the Reconstruction period. Reconstruction period, going back to Killer Mike, was one of the few times where blacks were mobilized, and they had economic and political power, but we did not entrench that power. And then we had the Jim Crow's laws come in, and you know, Andrew Johnson, President Johnson, who gives Trump a run for his money when we look at their policies and procedures and implementations.
Yeah.
You know, so it's beyond party. It's beyond just saying, you know, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, you know, New Panther Party. It's about bringing the resources necessary and the conversations necessary to end things like mass incarceration, to deal with how we interact with law enforcement organizations, to deal with the plasticity of education, of educators in the school systems. I mean, ask yourself, how many black male teachers did you have in your classroom?
Black male? I had one black male after school teacher.
You know, less than 2% of the teachers are black men.
Not a lot.
Yeah. That's
Right? So why? And then those are some of the things we as a community have to address within ourselves. Like, why is there so few him on a college campus? You know, what are we doing wrong at my son's age that doesn't lead to that? Is it cultural? Because, you know, we're all about, you know, cream and getting the bag.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
You know, but even if you're about cream and, you know, or money, without him, right?
Yeah.
You can't educate the next generation of youth.
That is well. That's just fact.
And then we have issues we have where people don't understand that there are three branches of government and they're co-equal. You know, they don't understand why it's important to vote because the teachers are not being supported. They're not being, you know, given the resources necessary to continue to educate us. Because, you know, at the end of the day, my father, you know, said, you know, America's a capitalist country and a democratic country. How do we impact both? You impact the capitalism by affecting them monetarily. You impact the democracy by voting. But what do you need for both? Education.
Exactly.
You need to understand how the game is played to play the game. And when we're not empowering people like my brother over there, or him, or and you know, I mean, we just had a conversation where I was like, "Hey, did you get your tenure?" He was like, "Yeah." You know, let's be real. Do you know how hard it is to get tenure as a college professor?
Well, can you elaborate what a tenure is, real quick?
Lawrence.
Well, tenure is essentially the idea that you get a job for life. So when you're hired on the basis that your contract is being renewed every year, and then that renewal is based on performance. Tenure is the idea that your performance shows promise, where Brooklyn College or some other school will keep you permanently. So I'm now at the point where I don't have to get renewed every year, and at the point at which I'm no longer employed at Brooklyn College, it's under my own terms, or it's going to have to be a fight to get rid of me. And it's based on me doing something egregious.
Congratulations.
Yes, sir.
Facts.
All right, y'all. So let's move into the next topic. Let's dive a little deeper into the significance of Black Solidarity Day and how it can be more acknowledged locally and nationally. What do you guys think?
Talking about the time and the context in which Black Solidarity Day came about, I think about three particular books: Black Awakening in Capitalist America, Crisis of the Negro Intellectual, and Black Power. These were all three books that was emphasizing what is the black populations, I say black population particularly, not community, you know, how do we organize ourselves into a community in which we can maximize all these vital areas of Black life. So economics, politics, being able to protect ourselves from police brutality, all these different things. And ultimately, when we talk about politics, the most basic politic is what is the meaning of Blackness itself, the political reality of Blackness, and ultimately, how do we defend ourselves, defend our existence? And when it comes to politics, Black people are free agents. We have no loyalty to any party. Democrats treat us like we belong to them, and Republicans disregard them. If we're organized internally, which means that we now have a collective understanding of how we spend our money, then people have to compete for our consumer dollars, and we don't have politicians who are just out there more loyal to corporations than they are to the community. So the most basic step is, what is the political reality of Blackness, and ultimately, what does it mean on the ground, where we live, what do we control, what do we organize, and stop waiting for people who are elected to be our voice. We put them there, and ultimately, that they serve us. But when it comes down to it, they serve Wells Fargo, they serve McDonald's, they serve all these corporations that, if we learn anything from the 70s, whether we're talking about Newark with Gibson or Atlanta with Maynard Jackson or whoever else, they were talking to Black people, giving us the rah-rah speech. The whole time, they're talking to corporations saying, here's our bottom line. So we have to make sure that we're organized in a way that they serve us, right? And if democracy is going to mean anything, which I'm not sure what it means right now, but if it's going to mean anything, it has to be based on how we're organized to meet certain goals.
Okay, so now I have a question real quick. So we do band together. Every Black Solidarity Day is it's a accomplishment. We accomplished it, right? Now, moving forward, when it's time for elections, locally, state, even the Oval Office, do we have reps from our group go run for these offices, or do we discuss, okay, who we're gonna choose? Because at the same time, that's why I'm asking in terms of politics. If we're going to fund ourselves, especially have our own finances sustain. I'm sorry. What do we do? Go ahead.
First, you have to determine what are the issues you want to, what are your goals,
Okay.
and how you want to accomplish them, right? And then we have to change the modus operandi on how we vote. Be it dog catcher, be it garbage man, registrar, depending on what state you're in. In Pennsylvania, you have magistrate judges. Then we need to organize around locally those first. You talk about the Oval Office. Oval Office is only one position. There are 1 million other elected officials across this nation that have significant impact on our government, on how you live. I mean, because of, Congress and, the president makes the rules, but how they're implemented is decided locally. So we need to locally organize first.
Okay.
Right? And then as we move forward, go to state, then go the federal route. Now when it comes to and then when it comes to Oval Office, hold the president accountable. And people think, oh, it's every 4 years. No, you can hold the president accountable every 2 years, because if the president is not giving you policies and procedures that are beneficial to the American public, if they're promoting judges that are disingenuous or will not move, not create a more socially just America, the congressman, you can remove the Senate. And then that creates a situation where the president's bill, dream, or vision cannot be passed, because remember, America's co-equal government. So it's not just the office of the president. Congress and Senate play a role. Supreme Court play a role. Part of the reason why President Trump won, or I like to call him Cult 45 won, was because the people who voted for him did not care he was a misogynist, did not care he was sexist, did not care he was amoral and immoral, did not care that he was a flagrant thief and stole people's wage earnings. He bankrupt parts of Atlantic City. What they cared about was that by electing this man president, they would get 2 Supreme Court justices. The one that replaced Merrick Garland and the one that replaced Anthony Kennedy. which now has made the Supreme Court a 5-4 conservative split. And what they're doing right now, while we're concerned about impeaching him and his inadequacies as president, they are putting federal judges, which, mind you, is a lifetime appointment, on the bench. And time after time, the American Bar Association is saying, this man is not qualified, this woman is not qualified. But because the Federalist Society says this person agrees to our values, they're putting them on. And see, this is where our mind has gotten messed up, because we're seeing the end zone, but we're not seeing how the refs are set. Because remember, judges are the refs.
Exactly.
You know, last week, a couple weeks ago, was it Green Bay versus the Lions? And all NFL season has all been about how bad the refs are.
Yeah.
The refs are the judges. So if you have bad judges, you're going to have a bad game.
Very bad game.
And that means we as a people are not going to move forward because we have bad judges. So that's why Trump won. They didn't, there's other reasons, but we're not going to speak on it. But the main reason when you talk to Republican voters and conservative voters and evangelical Christian voters, they supported him because they knew by getting that man in power, he would give them what they wanted, which was Supreme Court. We have to have the same mindset. If we're going to put somebody in the Oval Office, this is what they're going to give us. If they're going to make a governor, this is what they're going to give us. Garbage man, he's going to make sure our garbage gets picked up twice a day with no problem, twice a week with no problem. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. We would have to connect also Afrocentric nations, obviously nations in Africa, nations in the Caribbean, even.
So, I think so. Even like when you say people in Africa, people in the Caribbean, I think just because of some of the conversation that we have and stuff is like, and he just talked a little bit about the intersectionality and the what is black and all of that stuff, right? And there's so much division within the blackness. Like, so, and I say division not in a negative term, but more in a diversity term, right? And I think, sometimes we get so focused looking at, so I'm Trini, so I'm looking at Caribbean folks, and I'm interested in the Caribbean diaspora or stuff like that. And then Lawrence is from Chi-Town. He'll tell you that every day.
I just made him already know. Southside.
There's only one side.
Right. And then like you just try to rap some Spanish, and he's like, yo, English is what's spoken in my house, and it's like we as a people, we got so much history, right? And I say history because we come from so many different places, and I feel like sometimes we get distracted by the history and not looking towards the future and how we can really shift the politics, how we can actually have that solidarity, that black solidarity. Because it's not about Caribbean solidarity, it's not about Chi-Town solidarity or Michigan solidarity.
No, I'm from Brooklyn.
Yeah, all right. There we go. He switched up. You see that, right?
I went to Midwood High School. I graduated from Midwood High School. I graduated from Midwood High School.
But it's about that, right? And then some of the other things that you were talking about, like we look at white people and other groups for examples. When we got so many different examples within ourselves.
We're not saying, poo-poo what the Jews or other, white ethnic groups have done.
Yeah.
Even though that's what some people hear when we talk about black solidarity.
That's what they want. No, that's not. What we're saying is that, as you stated earlier, the importation of African slaves to America was a business decision. Right? The freeing of African slaves to become Americans was a business decision.
That's a fact.
That was implemented through war. These are facts. These are, it became, because as technology grew, it became less economical to have slaves than it was to do other economic means. Granted, was it immoral? Was it all the other stuff? Yes. But if it was still economically feasible at that time, the Civil War may not have happened.
That's a fact.
Granted, the country split up. There's things that broke down, but at its root, it was economics, and that's where my father's coming from. is like at its root, if we have an economic conversation with America about what we bring and what we earn and provide, we can then have a truer conversation. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying, and once again, everything I'm saying is not anti-America. It's not. It's far from it. What he is saying and what I'm saying is we must engage the system. You have people, oh, we can just live here by ourselves. Then if you're going to live here and not engage the system, then you cannot be mad when you have policies and rules implemented that adversely harm you and your young ones. You cannot be mad and complain about the industrial, prison complex if you do not engage the system. You cannot be mad about your wages if you do not engage the system.
Exactly.
Because we're not going back to Africa. We're
Only for vacation.
I'll visit, yeah.
But where in Africa? Kenya.
Ghana.
South Africa, Ghana, Morocco. People have this thing like Africa. Africa's like a huge continent.
Yes.
So where in Africa are we going, and how are we going to mobilize and organize there? Because if we don't mobilize and organize here, we go to Africa. We still have to mobilize and organize. So why not do it here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Why not do it here? And why not have, the impact?
Okay.
So just to touch on that, like when we first started this show and we spoke about the topics we were going to speak about and we introduced Black Solidarity Day, I personally never heard of that.
Yeah.
And so I did my research and I started asking my friends, like, have you ever heard of Black Solidarity Day? None of them knew what it was. And like you just said, like a lot of African Americans here who live in this country I think aren't proud to be Americans. They'll say, oh, I'm Jamaican. Oh, I'm such and such. Not like few of them tell me, hey, I'm American.
So that make you feel as a Marine, son.
Even before I joined the military, I don't know. I was always like, I was cool to be American. My father's from Trinidad, so
Trinity Bone.
my family's Trinity, but I don't know. I was always proud to be an American. I don't know if that led me to go join the military and be around other individuals who are also proud. But again, me joining the military, I wasn't around a lot of people who were my color. So when I came out of the military, came to school like Brooklyn College, around individuals like yourself. It made me more comfortable. But then learning about this subject, learning about this holiday or this day that we should practice more, I want to know what should we do more, because I feel like the history is something we all know. Well, we should know. Majority of us do know. But it's like, what's the next step? And I don't know if it's the Marine in me. I'm just like, give me the mission. And I'm ready. What do we need to do? If it's something simple as making a hashtag, or do I need to get outside and grab my friends, like, yo, we're not spending money today, bro.
First, we have to educate people.
Yeah.
Because, see, my father and I differ politically in many different ways. And where we differ is how to accomplish the same goals. And one of the things I've always held his generation accountable for is that they did the civil rights movement, they did the Black liberation movement, but they stopped. When I mean stopped, some of them got the good jobs, and some of them became part of the nepotism, where they're like, oh, I'm a congressman. Guess what? My son should be a congressman too. And they weren't bringing services in, and they weren't educating us. So there's like, we talk about the civil rights movement, right? Yeah. We talk about Martin Luther King. We talk about Malcolm X. Do we talk about Bayard Rustin? Do you guys know who he is?
That's why I'm looking at you like, who is he?
He was a black gay man who was fundamentally in organizing the March on Washington. Without Bayard Rustin, there's no March on Washington. Without him, there are so many other initiatives that would not have happened. But see, we ignore him. Why?
Is it because of the homosexuality?
Exactly.
That's what I was thinking too.
Within our community. We don't talk about, Bethune-Cookman. We don't talk about all these other civil. So Black Solidarity Day goes into the wind because we're so focused on the King, on the Abernathy, on the Malcolm X. We're not looking at in the Marcus Garvey. We're not looking at the like the other issues that could benefit us.
Right, and let me interject, because it's a question of what's the next step. And I would say, before we even get to the next step, what is the reality, right? So when we even think about the civil rights movement, oftentimes we start with, Jackie Robinson integrating baseball, or Emmett Till dying, or the March on Washington. But when we talk about the civil rights movement, we have to talk about what was happening in Reconstruction, Black Women's Club movement, Niagara movement. They were fighting for civil rights, and within that whole movement, we could talk about a civil rights movement that's 100 years long. and you had different aspects. You had the part that wanted to be a combinationist, wanted to be a part of America. You had the other part that said, you know, we might have to leave America. We might have to drastically transform America. We have to be radical. This is what radicalism looked like. So it's all these different, you know, thoughts within the civil rights movement itself, and we have to really understand that and say, what does that mean for us right now in 2019? Like, for me, the goal has to be something where we are more of an international group within America, and we have no ties to America. I see myself as black first, and I'm American despite America. So I have no love for all these ideas of patriotism and stuff like that. What do I mean and do for my people? And America, it might not be here at some point, but I want my people to be here, right? So that's how I look at it, and that informs my politics, and that aligns me with history in a way that says, here are the people in the past that represented me, and I want to continue that legacy.
We've come to the last leg of today's episode, and let's cap it off with discussing some solutions that could actually accomplish Black solidarity, not just Black Solidarity Day, Black solidarity. So now, in my mind, what would be the perfect time frame to start? Reason why I'm asking is because I know Rome. We all know Rome wasn't built in one day, and obviously we should be starting yesterday.
Yeah.
But then now, what is the perfect time to actually start this movement?
Now.
Today.
No, today.
Right now.
Today.
That was like some Family Feud now.
Right now, right? Okay, right now. But then, actually, to have that impact catalyst, a stronger impact with everyone else in the outreach.
But I think, go ahead, bro.
This is what we're here for, social media. This is where we know we can organize. You know, people can reach out to me, and we can also work with other youths to plan and organize. You know, this is the 50th anniversary of Black Solidarity Day, if I remember correctly.
That's crazy.
Oof.
Yeah.
Right? I'm focused on making sure people are more aware of it for this year, because it's the 50th anniversary. But I believe our focus should be on 2020. I believe that if we organize and mobilize and, you know, use... I used to be in development as well. I didn't tell you guys I worked for CUNY for 8 years, and part of my job was development. And in that, you learn to use research and statistics. Use research and statistics to look at key areas across the country where create a national movement, but focus on key states where there are majority people of color, majority or a growing people of color movement, and organize them. Organize, you know, make sure they're registered to vote. You know, because, you know, make sure they know where to go to vote.
Yeah.
You know, make sure that if we're going to, you know, not if, when we take that day of abstinence, that people, if they need if they need a ride to an event, that they have car rides, because you have to bus them, because you don't want them on the bus. You don't want them so you have to. So it takes organizational, you know, making sure that you prep people that on that Monday, because it's always a Monday before Election Day, that no one goes grocery shopping. So the day before, people got food in their house. People have, you know, what they need for that one day. You know, people always forget, and then you know, kind of like when a hurricane, and they always get, and you know, prep it early. You know what I mean? And then because we have social media and we have Facebook and we have, you know, Twitter, we can have a national conversation with people of the diaspora, be it, you know, and decide on 10 points. Not even 10, let's say 5 points. Five, be it economic, social points, you know, political points, and give it to the candidates. And be like, these are our 5 points. And then you can break it down on the local level. Like, locally, this is what's affecting us. Will you support these initiatives? Right? And then they go, yes. Then we organize and make sure we mobilize. You know, I had, what's the church, polls, souls to the polls. We do a souls to the polls. And we get them to vote. But the thing afterwards, which is the key, because we can organize like there's no tomorrow, is sustain it so that the following year, the year after that, when it's the, you know, we're like, hey, Congressman XYZ, you did not hold account for XY. Why? Or, you know, and we listen. All right, maybe we keep you in. Maybe we don't.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think, you know, along those same lines, it's like, you know, Kyrie mentioned education, you know, before we took a little small break. But for me, it's also about empowerment, right? Like, my big thing is about empowerment, and that empowerment will definitely help with the sustainability of whatever project, whatever goals and stuff that we set in for each other. So one of the things that he said he was praised his dad and their generation for was civil rights, black empowerment, and stuff like that, but they didn't empower the other generation coming behind. So I think for us, and this is why it's really imperative, that you guys continue doing this sort of podcast / web show, is the fact that you are the students, and you are actually going to be the ones empowering students just like yourself, generations like my daughter, his son. It's about really empowering and showing folks, like, this is what needs to be done to create a sustained change in the society for what we want. And I think that's always the biggest part. So we don't look to other people for solutions, because there's so much solution within just around this table here. You understand what I'm saying? But but once the biggest problem that I've encountered, and as a math major, even when I tutored students with math, it's not a matter that they didn't know the math or they didn't understand math, but when it came to their confidence and their self-esteem as it pertains to math, they internalize so much stuff that black people don't know how to do math, that they didn't even want to take the first step in doing it. But we understand math more than anybody else here. So for me, it's about empowering people, to believe that they could actually do that stuff. And we have a lot of different platforms. We have more access than his father's generation did. So we could actually go ahead and do stuff now.
And I'll say we have less organization than his father's generation. And I think it all starts with organization. So in terms of solutions, I'm saying we have to start in addressing where we're bleeding from. And when I say where we're bleeding from, if we look at a place like where I'm from, Chicago or New York, we're leaving the city. We're not in the city in the numbers that we used to be. And we have to look at the mechanisms in which we're being removed. And that becomes the point of immediate organization, the point of immediate, activism. So in Chicago, the Chicago Teachers Union right now are striking because we understand that public schools play a vital role in the lives of black people. And as we were talking about before we came back, charter schools are being used to remove black people from Chicago by depopulating public schools and then moving in white people in traditionally black neighborhoods in Chicago. New York is different because it's not so much the schools, but it's public housing, right? So that's an immediate point of activism. NYCHA, black people still in New York, public housing. New York is raising rents everywhere possible, exponentially. They would love to secure those public housings as private houses and bring in more higher rent paying people. And that's the immediate point of emphasis for how black people are going to stay in New York, right? Public schools in Chicago, immediate point of emphasis. They wanted to remove black folks from New Orleans, public schools. We have to identify these ground zero issues and say, this is our struggle, and then we use that to mobilize and then create larger coalitions and an organization where we're not just addressing, the needs, the most urgent needs, but also developing political base so we can actually make demands beyond that immediate issue and think about the local, state, and then national level and ultimately survive, because solutions mean that, there's going to be a point in which we're good, we've done everything we need to do, and I'm saying, no, we have to stop ourselves from bleeding out, and that's where we're at.
Well, I'll tell you guys one thing. To all the viewers out there, this is definitely, everyone's watching on Black Solidarity Day, first and foremost. So, happy Black Solidarity Day for all the viewers and listeners out there watching and listening. I think it's time to wrap up.
We're going to wrap up, man. I know what I'm going to do. I might be a little bit drastic, but I think I'm doing once a month. Black Solidarity, man. I'm trying to make a hashtag, just something to start a movement, man.
Exactly.
My generation, I don't know, our tolerance is really short. So I don't
It
know if a
is,
lot of them
it
going to
is.
sit there for a whole history
Tolerance
lesson.
is-
But I feel like if I can do a quick Instagram video or something just to quickly explain the problem, what we need to do, and what's the goal. And just one day out of the month, let's just start there. To just get with your family, talk about what's going on. Don't be abstinent from whatever we need to be, and we go from there.
Awesome.
I'm gonna try to start that. I need your help, man.
Hey, I definitely
Hold
got
each
your
other
back,
accountable,
bro.
right?
Hold each other accountable.
That's another
Exactly,
thing, the
exactly.
accountability. Yeah,
Definitely.
for sure. For
But
sure.
for those who are watching and listening, thank you. This is the initiative. I am Ocho.
I'm the eagle.
Guys, do you have any social media handles where you want them to follow you at, or you just want
It's private,
any
man.
any last minute plugins?
That's family stuff, man.
We're gonna post
I'm
down
not,
below
I'm
where
not,
to
I'm not a
find them, man.
millennial.
I understand. Thank you for watching. This whole time we had.
Catch y'all next time.